My story, or my journey rather, of 15,000 African storybooks started 13 years ago when my children were babies. And at the time, it was actually a no-brainer for my husband and I that we would speak to them in our African languages. It was one of those decisions as parents that we didn't even have to discuss. It was actually just seamless in how we did it. So in doing that then, we said, okay, we want to speak to them in our African languages because for us, that was an important connection to who they are as Africans. It was important in terms of their identity. It was important in terms of the culture. It was important in terms of their sense of pride. So armed with this decision, we then went about speaking in our African languages. Now, the dynamic with us is that my home language is Sesotho and his is Ndebele. So you can imagine then how people around us, our parents included, thought, okay, you're just going to confuse our grandchildren. Like, what are you doing? But we put on our academic hats on and did a lot of research and realized that actually this can be done. And after all, your average South African adult is bilingual or trilingual. So why can't we then just pass this on to our children as well? So we were very determined to do this because, as you know, language is inextricably linked to culture. So we thought, you know what? English is a given. As a middle-class Black person, they are going to learn English. But what about our languages and the culture that comes with that? So we soldiered on and wanted to then support this decision with storybooks, cartoons, videos, anything that can then just fit in seamlessly with our busy lifestyles. So off we went to the local malls to look into to bookstores to look for this material. You can imagine then walking in to this space, into this bookstore where from floor to ceiling you've got books galore. You've got different genres, you've got different sections. It is just packed with books. But when you look around, you don't see yourself as a Black person represented. And this was very problematic because, one, we know that we've got all those stories. We know that Africa is filled with stories. But somehow, growing up, you know about the Roman Empire and the Vikings, but you don't know about Queen Sheba and Mapungubwe and Timbuktu. You know about the Loch Ness Monster, but you don't know about Nyami Nyami, the mythical water god of Musiwatunya, who the Europeans call Victoria Falls, by the way. So it was very frustrating getting into this space where we know that from a content perspective, that is definitely something that we are not missing. But somehow when you translate that into what's available in our spaces, there is a gap there. And more than just about the content, it was also then about what does a story actually do? We must not underestimate the power of a story. A story can be inclusive. It can show you visually just that I matter because these people look like me. They come from my context. It resonates. But it can also at the same time tell you that you don't matter. It can exclude. It can then tell you time and time again, before you even get into the actual story, just looking at the visuals, it can tell you that actually you don't belong. Or as we like to say in South Africa, you're not steering. You're not the main person, right? So then for us then, I just found this very puzzling. And when I did the research at the time, I found that only 17% of stories are in African languages. Only 17%, and that included all the genres, so not just the children. So once you get to children, it was even smaller, less than that. And I found that then this was actually very puzzling because we are actually missing a big opportunity to deliberately empower our children through the images that they see and through the languages in which they read their books. And it was also very puzzling for me in terms of the educational piece as well. That the Department of Education and the Department of Arts and Culture could do so much more in terms of getting those stories into that space. I'm happy to say, though, 10 years later, there's a lot that has been moved in that arena. But the other thing that was also very important was that if we are then going to make sure that our children understand who they are, the story is also very powerful from a sense of imagination. When you read a book, you locate yourself in that book. You learn from that book. You wanna be able to, like the hero and heroine in the book, be able to then think, believe that you can do anything you want to do and be anything that you want to do. So when we're building up our children to then take over and build this economy and come up with local solutions and be the innovators and the inventors and the entrepreneurs of Africa, then by the stories that we're telling them when they feel excluded and alienating, we're actually doing the opposite. So with this then in mind, I had this crazy idea that I'm going to change the situation. Yeah. So what did that then mean? So we started out then by saying, okay, let's start out with the content that we have. So looking at the content, we then had Lula and Lebo stories that we created. It was very important in terms of the images that we used. Lula, whose full name is Lulama, which is Xhosa name, which means meek and soft-spoken. But trust me, Lula is anything but that. Then there's Lebo, Lebohang, which means to give thanks and to be thankful, her younger brother. So these stories then went around these two characters. And we also then wanted to make sure that her hair is something that children can relate to. The tone of their skin is something that other children can relate to. And mind you, when we said that we're going to put them on the cover, we had quite a few people telling us that no one's going to buy a book with a black child on the cover. 15,000 books. So we went about creating these storybooks. We also very deliberately created them in an urban setting. Again, we've got different contexts. It's not just one side of the story or the narrative that I had seen. And then, in addition to that, we then saw how can we infuse our African culture into these stories. So simple things like greeting, very important in African culture. So the storybook shopping day is actually to teach children how to greet and different ways of greeting. And the fact that when you enter a room, you must acknowledge the other person. And if you think about it, in Sesotho, the way that we greet to say hello, you would say okai or lekai, which actually means, where are you? To which the response is, kiteng, I am here. In isiZulu, sawubona, I see you. So it's deeper than just okay, yes, we've got our casual ways of saying it, but it's deeper, and I think that must not be missed in terms of the importance of why we say, when you enter a room, you acknowledge a person because you're saying, I see you. Where are you? I am here. And how we then as a society are going to start to understand one another if you can't even acknowledge my presence? So that was the Lula Ndlebo series. And in addition to the Lula Ndlebo series and the many adventures that they went on as a family, we also then did a folktale series, called How the Lion Got Its Roar, with Umamgcina Mhlophe, the queen of storytelling, who is internationally renowned as a storyteller. That was also another really wonderful thing to be able to work with her, but also the support that we got from the SA Book Development Council. In addition to that kind of support, we also got international support, recognition. We got approved by the Department of Education, Department of Arts and Culture. We got accolades all around. And I think more than just the accolade itself, it was actually just a validation that crazy idea that as a Black person in Africa, I can be present visually. It's actually not such a crazy idea. So, with that then in mind, we had this wonderful content, we had this great feedback from different people. So it was really wonderful, we're onto a good thing. Okay, but it's no good having these books just sitting in the warehouse, right? So enter distribution. Distribution separates the girls from the women. That's where it gets real. I'm telling you, content is ego. Distribution is reality. Okay, so how do we go about the distribution then? So, first of all, we went to retail, because again, remember that was where it was, the idea was born, that why can't we get into retail? We got into quite a big retail chain. Wonderful excitement, yay, we're in, great, so they're gonna bring in orders, this is it, gonna retire rich and young. Okay, reality is that they take up to 45 to 50% of your retail price. So cash flow is just non-existent. So your margins are just killed from the get-go. So that's the reality of retail, and that's the reality that they are actually dominant in the space, and as a small player, as a startup, there isn't really much that you can do about that. But that's fine. As an entrepreneur, you keep the hustle going, right? So besides the retailers, then we also then looked at direct. And direct was always, so it's either pop-up stores, either book fairs, the boot of my car, my handbag. I was that woman who had a book in her bag and would come upon unsuspecting people in the mall. And if I saw you with a child, I'm like, oh, I've got the perfect thing. Here you go. And our books are bilingual, so it'll be English with Sesotho, English with Sesotho. So it's like, no, actually we speak Sesotho. It's fine, I've got the Zulu, it's fine. Whatever you need. So the hustle is just there to get that cash flow going. And then besides the direct, we also did some international book fairs, which was great. We had an online store at some point as well, and I'll never forget when we got our first international order. I was so excited. I ran up to my husband. I'm like, we got an international order, and he's like, wait. No one we know? And I'm like, no one we know, a complete stranger. I don't know this person. And that was, again, just validating the story and the notion, and just the fact that a Black child can be on the cover of a book. And the fact that we've got so many stories that actually need to be told, and people are hungry to hear them. It's really just about how do you connect the content with the market. We did libraries, we did schools, both public and private. It wasn't until we did rural schools that the impact that the other side of the impact that we were having actually just hit home. It turns out that in South Africa, only 7% of our schools have functioning libraries. So access to books is a real problem. And what we then found was that through our books, we were actually killing two birds with one stone. We were getting them the books, so from a literacy perspective, we were having an impact. But we were also then getting books that would then fill them with pride and with self-esteem and really just connect them with the fact that I can be on a cover of a book, that my story also matters. And it's really that then drove a lot of the distribution, actually, but it just drove that bigger purpose of what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So we would do container libraries. We would take them to the rural areas. I've traveled quite a lot in terms of some of the places that we would go to. And the excitement when we arrive there and the kids see these books was just amazing. And they would unpack them. We'd also bring in their parents as well and the teachers so that they have a sense of ownership of the books and the library that's going to be used. And the excitement as you're unpacking them to hear the parents already and the teachers already saying, okay, so we're going to extend this as part of that corner library we had, and we're going to check them out, and the kids are going to, and this is as we're unpacking them. And that was really just priceless in terms of that kind of impact that you can have. We also then created a campaign called Give Books, Change Lives. And this was an opportunity for people to be able to buy the books and then be able to take them, distribute them to NGOs who were in the literary space. Again, just ensuring that you would be able to have the impact and the usage of the books. And we know as well that the impact of investing in education, especially at the foundation phase, just brings back returns more than any other phase of education. So if you build that foundation early through literacy, but at the same time building that sense of pride and recognition, then that is where the magic comes in terms of investing in our future and through our children. So with that in mind then, from a distribution perspective, I must say, it takes a village to distribute 15,000 books. So, along this journey, we had so much help from people who really just bought into what it is that we were doing. So we had, from our lawyer, from legal advice, to the financials, to marketing. At some point, one of my friends was like, "Oh, everyone's doing something for Buo. Like, this is just, everyone is coming in and getting involved in one way or the other." I mean, any kind of input that you need from a business perspective, we had friends coming along and just helping out in one way or the other. And to me, yes, it was about, helping, because this is a startup business and the like. But more than that, I think it spoke to the fact that there is that bigger understanding and support that people had in the mission and the purpose that we were trying to do in terms of getting our local content out into the market. So with that in mind, where are we now? So the picture has changed slightly. So that 17% of African content or languages is now sitting at about 20%. I think in terms of children's books, it is also starting to slightly change. But actually, if you think about the fact that children from 9 years and younger in South Africa, we have about 10 million children in that age group. The 15,000 that we did is a drop in the ocean. And the fact that when you walk through our public spaces, you also don't have that sense still that we are making that dent and that we are actually present. So there is still a lot more that needs to be done. There's a lot that needs to be done from a content perspective. We've got the stories. We need to get them out. And we need to get them out with urgency. If we are going to then build up our children to be able to believe that they can change our economy, they can change our society, they do have a valuable contribution to make from local solutions, then we do need to get more of those stories out. And what's really nice now is that self-publishing is also taking on more of a foothold than it was 10 years ago when we started out. We need to then distribute them, and we need to distribute them in more spaces, and not just rely on the retailers, but be more innovative in how we distribute them. But also for each one of us, are we asking the questions as we go into our different spaces? To put those demands on the retailers, on the schools, on any space that you're in, to say, we are living in Africa, why am I not seeing us represented? And then lastly, for our children, we then need to then make sure that they have those books directly. They've got the different content directly. So that when they're reading that story, whether it's a folk tale, whether it's fiction, whether it's a folk tale, whether it's about great civilization, whatever that story is, so they can then locate themselves into that story and translate that into their real lives and believe and know that they can do anything that they want to do, just like they read in a storybook. Thank you.